Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all. The wood from which it's made, for all I know, comes from a tree that was cut down in the state of Washington. To cut down that tree, it took a saw. To make the saw, it took steel. To make the steel, it took iron ore. This black center, we call it lead, but it's really graphite, compressed graphite. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I think it comes from some mines in South America. This red top up here, the eraser, bit of rubber, probably comes from Malaya, where the rubber tree isn't even native. It was imported from South America by some businessmen with the help of the British government. This brass ferrule, I haven't the slightest idea where it came from, or the yellow paint, or the paint that made the black lines, or the glue that holds it together. Literally thousands of people cooperated to make this pencil. People who don't speak the same language, who practice different religions, who might hate one another if they ever met. When you go down to the store and buy this pencil, you are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those thousands of people. What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was a magic of the price system, the impersonal operation of prices that brought them together and got them to cooperate to make this pencil so that you could have it for a trifling sum. That is why the operation of the free market is so essential, not only to promote productive efficiency, but even more, to foster harmony and peace among the peoples of the world.
Hi, welcome to Peace Propaganda, a weekly show about living peacefully and the people who try to prevent it. This is Adam.
And this is Becky.
We got an interesting show lined up for you. A really great show. We got a lot of positive feedback about last week's episode. That was episode 12, Open Up. People thought it was much more personal. We certainly made our best effort to open up in that episode. And yeah, we got a lot of positive feedback. And one of the things that people were saying was, we really got into how to think about problems in your own life and how to have a mental process where you can meet problems. But they were saying, some of the criticisms that we got, and we got a couple of emails from listeners saying that, how does this apply to an anarchist world? What does an anarchist world look like?
Yeah, it's a really common question for anarchists. People want to know what the future would look like in this anarchist, sometimes they call it a utopia if they're generally on the offense. But sometimes people just want to hear about what's possible and what you're dreaming because it can be inspiring,
Right. And I think a lot of what we talked about last week is very applicable to that discussion, which is to say, the theme of last week's show was how to understand problems, how to not just look at the symptoms of a problem, but how to really figure out what's causing it. And I think that applies not just to your own mental process, but it applies even more directly almost to the events around you, the institutions around you. Why do certain things exist that seem like, to many people at least, that they're very evil or at least not great?
And or at least not helping anybody in particular, except for maybe some very select few people. Right?
Exactly. So we wanted to get into a little bit of that today. So I guess I'll go right in. We had an email from a listener asking about. Well, he was referencing one of the previous episodes where I believe you had said, Becky, something along the lines of, in an anarchist world, Walmart wouldn't exist.
Yeah, at least not in its current form. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to take a second, maybe elaborate on that for the listener?
Yeah. So basically, the thing about Walmart, or pretty much any large corporation in the current economic environment, is a product of its economic environment. And when the economic environment is toxic, as it is currently, you end up with these sort of cancerous growths that we call corporations right now. But basically the idea is that without the guns and the government subsidies backing up the success that is Walmart, it really couldn't be the success that it has been.
Right. I mean, I certainly agree with that. And so, some of the specifics that came to my mind, I tend to look at things, through a lens of economics, specifically Austrian economics, typically, microeconomics, cause and effect, and incentive structures. And so when I look at Walmart, what I see is military adventurism, which is maybe not the most obvious connection to make in that situation, but to me the causal effect is very direct. So look at Walmart, which is, I mean, not to specifically demonize Walmart, but I think they're one of the best examples of like a huge, global mega corporation that feeds on basically coercive, violent institutions. So Walmart relies on a global supply chain. That global supply chain relies on things such as cheap oil. It relies on corn subsidies. If you've ever read Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, you'll learn all about how about 75 to 85% of anything in a grocery store, not just food items, has corn in it. We're talking everything from obviously the food, but also to the cardboard. A lot of that has like hydrogenated corn oil in it. So it's really, a lot of the costs of business are being subsidized through taxation. All right. And then, so let's get back to the oil. Why is oil cheap? Well, part of it is that literally they're taking money from me and you and giving it in the form of oil subsidies. But even more insidious is the military adventurism in the Middle East, where we're basically stealing, these natural resources from other countries and then shipping it back to America to prop up these huge corporations. And then of course you can get into the national highway system, which pushes off the cost of building transportation systems into onto the taxpayer, even though the mega corporations are benefiting wildly more than any individual is. So they're really tied into this whole coercive structure.
Yeah, I think the bottom line, whenever you're talking about any corporation within an economic environment, is that you really can't separate things out. Just like in iPencil that we were hearing Milton Friedman talk about in the opening clip, basically everything in the economy is connected to each other, and there's no separating out any of it and saying, oh, well, this corporation or this product that we're producing is totally, not dependent on anything else in the economy, and it stands on its own, because everything is dependent on everything else. And so you just can't say that. So to say that Walmart wouldn't exist in its current form without the government today it's absolutely accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just Walmart. Again, I mean, all of these big corporations rely on this. McDonald's, Monsanto, Pfizer in a different way. I mean, they get subsidized through intellectual property laws. I mean, anybody who opposes big pharma should be rallying against intellectual property laws. I mean, I couldn't be a more clear-cut case, in my opinion, of basically corporate protectionism for these huge corporations. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about in today's show. So we just gave sort of a couple of examples of the process of how to examine basically the violent roots of a lot of the problems in society. But
and I think it is really important to look at the way things are right now, just to sort of if you can identify where you are, you can identify what parts of it you don't want and which parts of it that you do want. And I think going forward in this show, we'd like to start talking about a little bit more how we can start dreaming a new reality that has a different environment, or a different economic environment, or different economic context.
Yes.
That's not so based in violence,
right?
And that can maybe produce different results than the Walmarts we have today.
Right, more of the pencil story and less of military adventurism, putting cheap foreign goods in Walmart. Not that I have anything against foreign goods, mind you, but I have something against me being forced to pay for them being so cheap, even if I never buy them. So that's it. Well, we got the music coming up. Be right back. I want to take this opportunity to tell you about Sean's Outpost, a homeless outreach program which has provided over 20,000 meals to the homeless in Northwest Florida. They're also funded entirely through Bitcoin donations. They are proving that we can address the problems in our community without the state, without its predatory welfare programs, and without its Ponzi money. Recently, Sean's Outpost launched its newest, boldest initiative, Satoshi Forest, a 9-acre homeless sanctuary where they are teaching permaculture, aquaponics, and self-sufficiency to the homeless residents. No one sticks a gun in anyone's face and makes them donate to Sean's Outpost, and yet, every day, people do. Please consider donating to this inspiring cause. Visit seansoutpost.com. That's SEANS outpost.com. All right, we got some Pennywise there, some 90s punk. Before that, we had Bob Marley, of course, with classic hit "No Woman, No Cry." So we were talking a little bit before the break about a couple of examples of the violence inherent in the system, as Monty Python would say. Come see the violence. But oftentimes I'll get into conversations, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I'll get in conversations where I'll bring up something like Walmart, or I'll bring up something like Monsanto or Pfizer, like we were just talking about. And a lot of times it sort of gets brushed off like it's one data point, which isn't necessarily indicative of a system-wide issue. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we want to talk about in this segment is no, that there's a lens to understand these things through, where maybe not every time anybody skins their knee is there, violent coercion happening. But I would say on the institutional level, 99% of the time, that's what's going on. Yeah.
And I think once you understand that perspective, everything becomes much clearer when you're looking at this kind of political landscape and economic landscape. You kind of, when you understand that the reason that things, the reason for all of the things unfolding the way they are is primarily due to the violence that's being initiated against the process, you really start to be able to put the pieces together and see what's happening around you in a much more intuitive way, I think, a much more like realistic way. Yeah, and I think a lot of times people will get this in isolated examples.
Like if the United States government said tomorrow that it's going to nationalize Android, like the cell phone operating system, mm-hmm. like, okay, this is a natural resource. It's a public good. And now the U.S. government owns it, and we're going to take over development for it. I think a lot of people would sort of get that would not be good for the Android market. They would be even more in bed with the NSA. There would be all kinds of negative effects. Well, and everybody has the general feeling that when the government gets involved in something, it gets bigger and slower, right? I would hope that people would get that by now. I suspect you're right that a lot of people get that, but yeah, who knows if it's everybody's, sure. Unfortunately. So it's an issue of why would that not be a good idea? What's the process at work here that's causing this ossification? What you're talking about, this hardening, mm-hmm. The state, state of no change. And it's the violence fundamentally. It's the easy way out. As some have phrased it, it's Novocaine for a toothache.
Right.
It masks the problem, but it doesn't fix it.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's Stefan Molyneux who likes to say that Obamacare is government without the anesthetic.
Yeah.
And so when you start to actually feel the effects of the violent coercion that's happening in these markets, and you actually start, literally being coerced in the form of taxes to pay for something that you don't want to pay for.
Right.
When it starts to become more obvious like that, I think people, hopefully people start to see that when you're doing something like forcing the market to be a way that it isn't and that you want it to be, that you don't get what you want.
Yeah. Have you seen that now some businesses are putting on, like, in the tax line, it'll be like state tax, yada yada yada, and then it'll be affordable healthcare tax.
Oh,
you've seen that? I
haven't noticed, but
yeah, which I've seen some mixed reviews of, which this sort of relates to what we're talking about. Actually, a friend of mine on Facebook said, like, this is ridiculous. I hope nobody goes to this business. And my response was, actually, I kind of like that. I kind of like it because, fundamentally, the business is going to be paying this tax whether you see it or not.
Right.
So I think putting it out there for people to see it, like you say, government without the anesthetic. In other words, they're sort of taking the blinders off.
Yeah.
Like, this is why you're paying more. This line right here.
It reminds me of how, employers pay, what is it, like half of your social security? Are all taxes or just social security? Something like that.
I think it's all federal income taxes.
Yeah. And
they pay half.
So you only see the half that you're paying, but the reality is that the cost of you as an employee is twice in terms of taxes.
Right. That's very timely right now. Anybody who's filing their taxes, sorry to be so U.S. centric. Unfortunately, this is what we know. But I'm sure for our foreign listeners, and we do have some foreign listeners, I'm pleased to say, I see the stats, and I know you're out there in Hong Kong and Australia. Thank you so much. But I'm sure it applies the same to you. All these tax structures, there's so many hidden costs in them. And so anyways, before we end the segment without talking about the core issue here, which is being able to look at a system and see where the violence is, right? And so, what's another example of a big industry that people typically look at it and say, oh, well, that's just evil, greedy corporations. Fracking.
Oh, sure.
Fracking or the new oil pipeline. Everybody says, oh, this is just evil corporations having their way with Mother Earth yet again. But it's like, look at everything that has gone into allowing these things to happen. First of all, hello, public land. Again, it's happening on public land.
Right.
How much more obvious could it be if this is the U.S. government saying, "Oh, you want to buy this land? You want to live here, or you want to preserve it yourself?" Tough shit. This is public land. Yeah. And you know what that means?
Which means nobody's going to preserve it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a complete, like, house of mirrors. I don't even understand how it's not painfully obvious when, how can you say these are just greedy corporations, like, acting in some kind of vacuum? Right.
Right. It's like I've been saying, I find myself saying this a lot lately. Don't hate the player, hate the game. And the reality is that the rules that we have in place right now are just not keeping the game in balance.
Right. Not at all. And it's the same thing with net neutrality, by the way. This is a big issue these days. Net neutrality is such a crock. It's a complete crock. They're selling you a bill of goods. This is like a total liberal nonsense talking point. I'm sorry to say it so bluntly, but it's complete effing nonsense. First of all, the lines, the cable lines were built by the United States federal government and then sold at below cost to these companies. Mm-hmm. Bam, right there. There's your violent subsidy in the form of taxpayer money building these things. Right. Then the whole licensing schemes for these, over the airwaves, as well as licensing these lines, is totally, completely corrupt. I can't get into it right now. We got the music coming up, but it's insanity. They auction off vast swaths You wonder why we have big corporations. I'll be right back.
Leave your mind blown. Place your bets, let's peek to the enemy. Don't let them pretend that we seek blood. And who's we anyway? Kimo Sabe, mighty warlord, wanna be street dog. A threat for a threat leaves the whole world terrified. Blow for blow never settles the score. Word for word, it's time we clarify. We the people did not want war.
Hey, this is Becky, host of Peace Propaganda. I know that starting something new is really hard, but it's important to get our message heard. That's why we want to help you promote your liberty-related project. We're offering free 45-second time spots on Peace Propaganda. That's right, free. So, do you have something that you're trying to promote? Contact us at host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. That's host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. You can send us information about your project and we'll share it on the show. We look forward to hearing from you. All right, so we've just been talking about the violence inherent in the current system, and I really want to encourage the people who are looking for descriptions of the future for, you know, in order to be inspired, because I think that inspiration is really important, and I think we do need to be dreaming, and we need to be dreaming while we're awake instead of sort of sleepwalking through life, which I think, you know, is more common than we may admit. So for me, I was a software engineer, a professional software engineer for 4 years. And what one of the most important things I learned about that industry was with regard to customers asking for features that weren't already available in the product that we had created. So when you're on a software development team, or the software development team I was on had created a web app for a group of customers, and the customers would sometimes want things that were really easy and obvious, or, you know, really simple to accomplish because they sort of followed the same line of evolution that the product had already taken, and it was just an obvious next step.
You're talking about corporate customers here wanting...
Yeah,
I'm trying to follow.
Yeah, so customers that were using the web app.
Gotcha.
But yeah, internal customers.
Right, business to business type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, sometimes they would want something that was really obvious to implement because it was sort of along the line of least resistance already.
Right.
But sometimes they would ask for a feature that was really like very far off the beaten path. You know, to them it was an obvious feature in the web app, but to us it just didn't really fit into how we had already formulated our model or our understanding of the problem. And what the most important thing I learned about software engineering is that when you get a request like that that's really far off the beaten path and you can't see the obvious way to solve the problem, the only thing that ever helps is to leave it alone, to leave the problem alone and let it marinate in your minds. The team, the collective teams, all the people on the team need to have it in their head that, like, this is a goal we need to reach somehow, and then you just let it marinate. And what happens, I mean, pretty much invariably, is that eventually you find yourself in a position working on this project where the solution has become evident, like very obvious and very simple, just because your minds have sort of been like not directly on it, but sort of letting it run on the back burner, you know? And I think that this is a really great metaphor for how the market works. So basically, I think when humanity has it in their mind that they want something to be a certain way, all that really needs to happen in order for that new thing to emerge is you just kind of have to let it exist in your imagination and not worry too much about how it's going to happen, but just trust that it will.
Gotta let go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. That's I think is a really important metaphor. And so you use the phrase there, I think accurately, this is the power of the market. And so what you're talking about there, the market, of course, itself is a metaphor. It is a metaphor for free association. Mm-hmm. It's a metaphor for nonviolence. It's a metaphor for people coming together for a mutual cause. I think a lot of times it's, you just hear this nonsense like, you're talking about social Darwinism. You're talking about, the poor, it's like all this fear, confusion, and all that stuff. And we were talking on the way here about what I recently saw, which is a project called Farm Hack, which I think is a perfect example of this sort of decentralized, just dreaming of a better world type thing. Decentralized, by the way, not the same thing as democratized. These are terms that get used almost interchangeably. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. Nobody wants to vote on the next form of progress. That's not how things work. We're talking about decentralization. We're talking about solutions coming from the ground up. Okay, and so Farm Hack is just one example of many of people saying, hey, look at big agriculture. This is obviously, the game is rigged. They have these multi-million-dollar machines that nobody could hope to compete with, and yada yada yada. It goes on and on. And so Farm Hack is a project where they're crowdsourcing it. All right, so it's just basically people doing gardens, small farms, coming up with their own almost mechanical type devices, and so it's very crowdsourced technology, easy to produce, cheap to produce. They're putting it up online where anybody could download it.
Yeah, I
open
think
source.
Crowdsourcing is a really important idea for the future, and I think it's probably the way everything is going to be done in the future, honestly.
Right.
And so that's a really good sort of specific descriptive example of the way things can change in the future. But when I think about the future, I like to think more generally. Sure. And I really like to think, and I'm like the biggest optimist you'll ever meet, because I guess I don't really see a point in being any other way. But for me, when I think of the future, I think of how wonderful it will be when everybody realizes that the only way to get what you want is to relax and allow things to happen, and then respond in a way that moves you towards your goal peacefully.
Yeah.
And
it's freeing.
Yeah.
It's liberating.
And I mean, the world that you would live in for that to be true, you would trust everyone around you, strangers and family alike, because that, in order for the world to sort of coexist and be sustainable, you would have to be able to trust the average person.
Yeah, I would say generally that's the case. A lot of the distrust in the modern day is again, that is itself is an institution born of the corruption and centralized violence. Yeah,
and so when you get this heightened trust amongst large groups of people, I think what you get is really interesting collaborations and synergies, and you also get a lot more love, and you get a lot more freedom in terms of feeling comfortable, like we talked about in one episode, women being comfortable topless, for instance.
Yeah, right.
I feel like that's a lot of what the future could look like.
Yes.
Love and peace,
right,
instead of war and violence. And I think also that when we stop initiating violence against the market, what will be the result is that the market economy will be able to provide us with whatever it is that we want as humanity. I think as soon as we stop initiating violence against the market, what will emerge will be the world that humanity dreams into existence together. So it's whatever we can all dream together. That's what we can have.
Yeah.
It's anything we want.
Exactly. I really like that optimistic message there. That's that's pretty much how I feel about it too. Just why keep pointing guns at each other and getting in each other's way? When we can
have anything
right?
we want.
Create pencils from around the world peacefully. It's beautiful. So, okay, that's it for today's show. I hope you go to the show notes and check out. Again, we have links to all the songs that we put in here. I haven't been doing clips for the past couple episodes, but that's okay. There's still some valuable stuff in the show notes, where, of course, you'll find how to email us. That's at host.peacepropaganda@gmail.com. You can find quick links to all of these different ways to follow us and interact with us. But just to remind you, you can follow us on Twitter at Peace Podcast. Please like our page on Facebook. We are more and more active on there. Obviously, you can follow us on SoundCloud. Just search for Peace Propaganda on there. Same thing with Stitcher and iTunes. If you could rate us on iTunes, that would be wonderful. Or even just click the little heart button on SoundCloud. That brings people to the page and gives us some more listeners. So that'd be wonderful. And of course, there's the Bitcoin tip jar there in the show notes as well. So that's it for March 1st, 2014.
Have a great week.
Young kid try to make the grown man dough. No navigation, but it's nowhere that I can't go. Shit, this beat not like Kimbo. And once the shit boom, change up the tempo. We be in the car, roll the crack a window. Shit, you always feel good off the endo. And I made this for them Hollywood bimbos. And do I really need a motherfucking intro? Show up to the venue, the food is on the menu. And if it ain't the menu, to buy out what they send you. They hook us up with sour, performing in an hour. And give me 23 more, I'll be Jack Bauer. Hop in the line, then we cut to the front. Then I proceed to have a shorty roll me a blunt. I say that if you swallow, you can never be stuck. I'm in the kind of mood just to get whatever I want. Whatever we want, we could do whatever we want.